Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Edward III, and today we get to hear from Prince Edward in Act 4, Scene 4. Now, if you remember at the beginning of this war, the English were doing well, but we're now at a point in the play where Prince Edward has gotten himself surrounded. They were doing well enough that there was a little bit of back and forth smack talk on the battlefield between King Edward and King John of France. But then King John of France had to sort of retreat a little bit, and the English thought they were doing really well. So Prince Edward and half of the troops went off after King John. King Edward went to Calais, where he's laying siege to the city, and they wanted to surrender. And he's like, nope, too late. You got to send out your 6 wealthiest merchants and have them be naked and prostrate themselves, and then I can do whatever I want to them. And then maybe we'll let your city still survive and exist. But now in Act 4, Scene 4, we're checking in with Prince Edward and Lord Audley. And we heard from Lord Audley yesterday just exactly how dire the situation is. They're sort of in like a crescent of hills. They're in the valley between that crescent. And if they try to go out without going over hills by going forward, there's where King John is. Charles, Duke of Normandy, the eldest son, and his troops are on this field. Philip and his troops, he's the youngest son of King John, is over on this field, and then there's Chatillon and his troops behind them. So Lord Audley was giving sort of a full, detailed, itemized account of this in his monologue yesterday, and Prince Edward responds by saying, "Death's name is much more mighty than his deeds. Thy parcelling this power hath made it more. As many sands as these my hands can hold are but my handful of so many sands, then all the world, and call it but a power, easily taken up and quickly thrown away. But if I stand to count them, sand by sand, the number would confound my memory and make 1,000 millions of a task, which, briefly, is no more indeed than one. These quarters, squadrons, and these regiments before, behind us, and on either hand are but a power. When we name a man, his hand, his foot, his head, hath several strengths, and being all but oneself, instant strength. Why all this many, Audley, is but one, and we can call it all but one man's strength. He that hath far to go tells it by miles. If he should tell the steps, it kills his heart. The drops are infinite that make a flood, and yet thou knowest we call it but a rain. There is but one France, one king of France. That France hath no more kings, and that same king hath but the puissant legion of one king. And we have one. Then apprehend no odds, for 1 to 1 is fair equality. What tidings, messenger? Be plain and brief." So Prince Edward is being very optimistic here, but he does sort of have a point. You know, if you're looking at things in terms of their army has 60,000 men and our army has 8,000 men, yes, it's going to sound like they have the advantage. But if you just say they have an army and we have an army, it seems much more equal. So what he's saying is, like, stop telling me the odds, stop counting each individual man on each individual horse and each individual banner that they're flying all around. Like, those numbers make my head hurt. This is King Edward versus King John. It's one army versus one army. So it's equal. We still have a shot because we have an army too. Yes, they have an army that's all around us, but we have an army too. So we are still in this fight and we can still do it. But then at the end, a herald from King John comes in. So Prince Edward is like, you know, what do you have to say? And the herald is like, King John can see that you're in kind of a sticky situation. So if you and 100 of your men sort of surrender now and come and bend the knee, then we can just call it a day and everything can be over. And Prince Edward is very offended by this. He's like, no way, we're still in this to fight. We're gonna see more French blood spilt today. Go on back and tell him, no, we don't accept his offer. And then a herald, I believe the herald from Charles, comes in first and has a horse with him because Charles is like, you might want this horse to run away. And Prince Edward is very offended by this and says, no, I do not accept your offer. I am not running away from this fight. Take the horse, get out of here. No, we're not doing that. And then a herald from Philip comes in with a prayer book to give to Prince Edward and Lord Audley, saying, you're probably going to be needing to say some prayers very soon because your situation is not so good. And Prince Edward is going to have a monologue response to that we will hear tomorrow. So I will see you then. Mwah.